Beautiful city of Wilsonville in the state of Oregon. My name is Joe Mohan. I am the president of Korean War Legacy Foundation, which has about more than 1,500 Korean War veterans interviewed, not just from the United States, but from all other 21 countries that participated in the Korean War. We are doing this to preserve your memory, first of all, because it's been already more than 70 years ago since the breakout of the Korean War in 1950, but also we want to honor your service. But most importantly, we want to challenge the name of the Korean War as forgotten war. It has to be remembered and has to be learned by our younger generation about the lessons of the Korean War, your honorable service, and the place of Korean War in contemporary global international politics. It's very important history, but we haven't done much about it. That's why we are going to use this interview as a curricular resources so that teachers can use about the war. And you are very special because you are not just a Korean War veteran. You were there in Korea from 1945 to 49.
No, it's, I was there.
As an occupation?
40,
force.
yeah, I was there in 46 and 47.
46 and 47, but whole occupation force were there from 1945
Yes, right.
until the complete withdrawal of 1949.
Right.
Right, so you are very special. You are not just a regular Korean War veteran, but you were there earlier than the Korean War, okay? So this is great. It's my great honor and pleasure to meet you, sir, and thank you for coming to share your story. Please say your name, please.
Yeah, John D. Hartup Jr.
Can you spell it?
Yeah, John Dewey, Dewey, Hartup, Hartup, Jr., Jr.
Jr. What is your birthday, sir?
August 7th, 1928.
Where were you born?
I was born in Long Beach, California.
Long Beach, yeah?
And a little bit about my family. My mother came from Texas, and my dad from Ohio, and they met in California, Long Beach, which is outside of Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And they were, my dad came, he worked for Goodyear Tire Company in Ohio, and they built a new plant in Los Angeles, and they needed workers. So he came, and my mother was off the farm in Texas, and she came there to enjoy the countryside.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any siblings?
I have two siblings, two daughters, Connie Shearer.
No, when you were growing.
Oh, I had
your brothers and sisters.
One brother.
Just one brother.
One brother.
Younger or older?
2 years younger to the day. He was born August 7th also.
Same birthday?
Same birthday.
But younger to you?
Right.
Same birthday. And tell me about the school you graduated, high school. When did you graduate? What high school was it?
Let me talk about first grade school and then high school.
Yes.
My dad moved around, and I went to 5 different grade schools growing up, and I went to grade schools in California, Oregon, and then when I graduated from grade school, I went to high school in Portland, Oregon for 1 year. And and after that 1 year, my dad got transferred to Phoenix, Arizona. and I finished my high school in Phoenix, Arizona in actually, I finished my work in 1945 so I could join the Army.
Did you graduate 1945?
Yes, I had my year was 1946, but I had all the credits to graduate. I didn't have to go another year, so I joined the Army.
But what's the name of high school?
North Phoenix High School.
North Phoenix
Phoenix
High School. And you enlisted Army?
I enlisted in the Army on my 17th birthday, August 7th, 1945.
45. So where did you get the basic military training?
Okay. What happened there when I enlisted, the Army had a program that they would send us to college until we became 18. And then when we became 18, we would go on active duty basic training and go on with our active duty college. So they sent me to University of Utah. There was 300 Army, 200 Navy there at University of Utah. And we covered about a year and a half of college in 9 months. They worked us from 7 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then, continuing, when the Army closed this training program down, so rather than wait to be called, I just automatically went over and enlisted for 18 months.
Yep.
And after enlisting, I was sent to basic training in Fort Bliss, Texas.
Fort Bliss.
And we, for 2 months, and then after Fort Bliss, they had a regular sort of pipeline to Korea. I went back to San Francisco, where I was living at the time, and the troop ships left San Francisco for Korea in 1947.
1946?
Why? 46.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the month? Was it summer or?
It was September.
September.
September 1946.
So where did you arrive in Korea?
Oh, Incheon.
Incheon. So tell me about this. Why were you there in Korea in 1946? Why?
For occupation duty, the Japanese surrendered, and the U.S. moved in to accept their surrender. I lived in Japanese barracks, a place called Ascom City.
Ascom?
Yes. It's halfway between Seoul and Incheon.
A-S?
ASCOM.
C-O-M. Why was it called Ascom City?
I don't know.
So it was between Seoul and?
Incheon.
Incheon.
Halfway.
Yeah.
And they called it, it was a place where it was a headquarters of Korea Base Command. And the Korea Base Command was a group of ordnance, all various types of support units for the Army.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a military, an infantry base. It was a support base. And I was assigned there. I can, all right. I was assigned to headquarters company, and they looked over my records. They thought I could type, but I couldn't type, so I ended up in the motor pool. And I had a job of staff car driver. I drove a full colonel every day, and I would take him wherever he wanted to go. And so as a result of that, I got to know Seoul, Incheon, all those areas.
Excellent.
Yes.
What was your unit?
It's the second, Korea Base Command. That's what they call it. Korea Base Command.
What division?
No division.
No division, no battalion, no regiment?
No.
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 What was your rank?
I ended up a corporal.
Corporal. And your specialty was?
Driving the colonel.
Transportation.
Transportation.
Yeah. So, did you learn anything about Korean history when you were in high school, North Phoenix High School?
The only thing I knew about Korea was I collected stamps, so I knew where it was on the map.
Oh.
But outside of that, no study of history.
So that was your self-learning, right? Collecting stamps, and
yes.
so that you knew where Korea was, but other than that, nothing was taught in the school.
That's right. And collecting stamps, you learn a little history, like the Japanese taking it over in 1910, and you learn that. And one of the things that, when I was there, our biggest problem, the Russians were on the north and the Americans were in the south. And they were getting ready for elections in 1948. And our biggest problem, we couldn't find people that could speak Korean and English, and or English people that could, like Sigmund Rhee, he learned English from the missionaries. So
he finished his education in the United States. He got a PhD from Princeton University. He got his master's degree from Harvard University. So he speaks very good English.
Yes, and that's why he got elected president.
Right. Okay.
And just one reminiscing I think about now, there's a road between Seoul and Incheon, and all the roads in Korea were gravel at the time.
Yeah.
And the engineers, Army engineers, paved the road between Seoul and Incheon in about 1947. And I have a picture of it after it was paved, and one of the first things they used it for was a bicycle race. All the Koreans got their bicycles and could ride on that nice pavement.
Really?
Yes.
Never heard about that.
Yes.
Wow, so you have a picture of that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. You brought an album, lots of pictures, and it's really well metadated. You wrote where and when, so it is really historically valuable, and you graciously share that picture with me so that we can scan this and put it on the website so that people can know where you are and how was Korea in 1947 and 6. That's amazing, so thank you very much.
Well, my pleasure. One of the things in those days, the Japanese barracks were very run down and not maintained. And the winter of 46, it was 10 degrees at times in our bedrooms. So
in your bedroom?
Yes. So when we had a saying, when the water freezes on the floor, we don't have to mop them. And another thing...
so it saved your labor.
Right. And when I first got there, there was there's nothing to do in Korea. We could not eat in any restaurant. We had to eat only in Army mess halls. So therefore, it was 6 weeks before I even left the post. And, yes. And because I don't know how I survived, but you just could take a sandwich or something like that, but no eating. And the reason for that is that the Koreans at that time were using human waste to fertilize all their vegetables.
Yeah, so smell.
Smell, everything.
What do you mean everything? Smell nasty, right?
Right.
You didn't like it at all?
No, but no, I didn't. And then kimchi on top of it.
You didn't like it?
One time, while I was there, my colonel was going out for a run at 7 in the evening, and I went to the garage to get the car, and I opened the door, and there was a Korean soldier in there sleeping, and my car smelled of kimchi. So I had to roll down the windows and drive it around for 5 minutes to get all the fresh air back in there.
Man, so when you landed in Incheon and you went to Seoul, and that was before the war, how was Seoul? Well, all buildings were there, right?
Old buildings, old streetcars built by the Japanese. Everything there was built by the Japanese.
How was Seoul? What did you think about the Seoul at the time when you saw it for the first time in your life?
Typical Oriental city. There were certain places that Doksu Palace. I'd go there for just to walk around, and I met Korean people there. But there was no. It was just the streetcars and trucks, taxis. But I did see vegetable stands. People from the farms would bring in their food to sell.
Doksu Palace, D as in David, E-O-K-S-U, Doksu Palace, right?
Right.
Yeah. Did you go to Gyeongbok Palace? There was another palace there.
That might be it. I'm sure. We called it Doksu, but
Right.
they had, the Russians and the Americans had several meetings there.
There, yes.
Dirt floors. The Japanese hadn't completed it.
How did Korean people look to you
Um,
at the time?
They were very poor. They,
How did you tell?
because they had rice from Thailand. Thailand sent in rice because they were so poor. And when the rice came from Thailand, it was cracked. And the Koreans there said, that's no good, it's cracked, that's chicken feed. We want pearl rice, white, big stuff. And I said, if you're hungry enough, you eat it. But they were very poor. No, like during the wintertime, we had Korean workers, and like my wash, I have my wash done by a lady down at the stream, beating the clothes. And the best thing you could give a Korean there would be toilet paper or even balm for their nose, for their lips.
Oh.
They were bleeding. Some of them had bleeding lips. And I could get a week's worth of laundry for 2 packs of cigarettes.
You gave the cigarette to them so
Yeah.
that they can sell it in the market, right?
Yes, right.
Where did you sleep? Where were you in Seoul?
Well,
You were in the Ascom City, right?
Yes, I was at Ascom City. Mm-hmm.
Did you sleep in the tent or did you sleep in the Quonset? Where were you?
It was these old Japanese barracks.
Barracks.
And I've got a picture of them before and afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And Ascom City was the Korea-based command base, and that was located around the district of Bupyeong. Now Bupyeong, Bupyeong, and it's just between Incheon and Seoul. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah. How many were of you there?
The whole base was probably, I'm guessing, 3,000.
3,000?
Yes. But when you take ordnance people repairing trucks outside of our camp, they had trucks, 2.5-ton trucks, a 5-year supply. And they were always bringing those from that supply point, working them over, and they were doing that type of work.
Right. And what these occupying forces were doing there in Seoul and Ascom City or in Korea, mostly what they were doing?
They were trying to organize the government. In other words, when the Japanese left, they took all the talent with them, the mayors, the high school principals, and they took all the jobs of importance back to Japan. And it was up to us to get an organized government. Like, I have a picture there of new police, maybe 100 men being trained to be policemen. And I also have other pictures showing of the political unrest with the communists demonstrating and well, they were demonstrating and they were put down by the police, but that was going on at the time.
I see. And how did Korean people receive the American military soldiers? How do they react to it?
They loved us.
They liked it?
Yes, they loved us.
Why?
Because we gave them jobs.
Uh-huh.
We probably, we operated the port of Incheon at that time also.
Uh-huh.
So we probably had 1,000 workers there at Incheon unloading ships. And we really put them to work because probably to help them out, give them money. It was kind of a relief plus doing work for us.
Mm-hmm. So Korea was under the Japanese colonial control from 1910 to 1945. By the end of World War II, Japan was expelled from Korean Peninsula and American forces replaced them and reorganized the whole country, right?
Right.
That's what you were doing.
Right.
So that Korean people liked it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Were there any demonstration against the American military? There were communists, socialists in South Korea, right?
Yeah. No demonstration that I saw against the military.
Uh-huh.
It was just they were getting ready for the elections in '48, and they were trying to influence people with their demonstrations.
So there was an election in 1948, and they elected Syngman Rhee as president.
Right, and the Russians didn't have any election.
Right.
Right.
They were supposed to do, but they didn't.
That's right. That's history.
Yeah. Do you remember how much were you paid?
Maybe $50 a month.
And did you pay by cash or script?
In those days, we just used script.
Script, right?
Right.
Right.
I had a savings plan where I could take 10% of my money and it would go into a U.S. bank. Mm-hmm. But we had the script. And that's another story. Every 6 months or so, they'd have everyone get to your radios, big announcement. They change the color on the script from blue to red, and so as to all the black money, get the black money off the market.
You mean the counterfeit?
Yes, right.
There were counterfeit too?
Yes.
Wow. Who made it?
Oh, no, not
counterfeit.
Yeah, they would take it.
Uh-huh. So what did you do with that money at the time? You had a uniform, you had a food, right?
Yes.
And so what did you do with that money?
Spend it in the PX that didn't have much. They had Spanish peanuts and cigarettes and maybe toothpaste or just about 4 or 5 items. It was very, very sparse.
What did you spend for that?
Yes. Another story, we were selling cigarettes at $1 a carton. And after a year in Korea under these conditions, they would send us to Japan for R&R.
Right.
So the exchange rate in Japan was, say, 60 yen to the dollar, but I could sell a carton for 300 yen. So everybody that went on the R&R loaded up with cigarette cartons, maybe 10 or 20 cigarette cartons, and they lived on that for a whole week.
Whole week.
Yeah, could go out and buy souvenirs and drink beer, and we stayed at a very fancy Japanese tourist bureau hotel.
Wow. You guys were smart.
Yeah, right. They didn't put us in jail. They gave us a break.
How much was it, the cartoon? What did you just say?
As I remember, the official rate was 60 to 1.
Yeah.
And the carton got 300 yen.
One cartoon?
One carton.
Wow.
And it cost me $1, same as. So I could go to the bank and get 60, or I could sell a carton of cigarettes and get 300.
That's pretty good business. Were you able to go out of the Ascom city?
Yes.
So did you go outside and go around the city, or you went to Seoul? What did you do?
We would go to Seoul most of the time, and then also to keep the morale up, because there was nothing to do for entertainment. We did have USO shows maybe once a week, but then
USO show.
Yeah, with the performers, actors, singers, and dancers, and that was about once a week. So
what kind of actress did you see at the time? Who were there?
I don't know their names.
Okay. But famous?
Well, no, the famous ones went to other larger installations.
Got it.
But, yeah.
So when did you leave Korea?
Oh, wait, one more thing.
One more thing, yes.
We could get a Jeep, rent a Jeep while we were there and go sightseeing. And the fare on that was 1 penny a mile, 1 cent a mile. So we could go out and have a lot of fun sightseeing north of Seoul, all over there. And we went to Sangdo out of Incheon.
Songdo, yes.
Sangdo. They had a hotel there that we went there about once a month for a couple days just to get away from our camp.
So you mentioned that there was a rent car? You pay the money to rent a car?
Well, Army Jeep.
Army Jeep.
Army Jeep.
So you had to buy fuel for yourself?
Oh, no,
No,
no.
no.
Rather than just make it free, they just,
So you were able to use the Army Jeep
on weekends.
on weekend to see around.
Yes,
That's a nice deal.
right.
How was Songdo at the time?
They had a little lake and boats and a hotel, and it was very nice, very nice.
Did they cook American food for you?
Oh, yes, it was run by the U.S. Army.
U.S. Army, so it was a U.S. Army hotel.
Right.
So you had a good time there.
No, well, yes and no.
Tell me, why is no?
Okay. The living conditions were cold in the winter, freezing.
You didn't have stove?
Didn't have what?
Stove, the heating.
No,
Not
no.
at all?
Just, we had it, but it wasn't working
Okay.
most of the time.
No.
The Japanese, they burned coal and they made steam, and then they piped the steam to the barracks.
Right?
And lots of times we didn't have steam.
Didn't work.
Right. And it's got to be just staying warm, like in the winter there, when it was down around freezing, I'd take the staff car and face the sun and let the sun come in. That was the warmest place. The other place was in the office with a coal-burning stove. So we'd sit in that car and face the sun to get warm.
Any other negative experience that you had at the time?
Any what?
Any other negative? No?
No.
Were there any Korean busboy working for you guys?
No.
Not at all?
They did at the motor pool. They would wash vehicles, but no bus boys to clean our rooms or anything like that.
So when did you leave Korea then?
November 1947.
And you went back to
Went back to the United States and then back to college.
college. What college did you go?
I went to Washington State University now, Washington State University in Pullman, Washington.
And what did you study?
Civil engineering.
Wow.
And I graduated, here we're coming up to the time of the war.
Yeah.
I graduated in 1950.
When? May?
Yes. And I went to work for oil company and had just started to work for them, and the Korean War started. And
But before that, when you were there in 1946 to 47, you came back, but did you have any hint that there will be war in Korea?
No,
Not at all.
not at all, because the Russians had the north, we had the south, and no inkling of war. It was a surprise, because the U.S. did not equip the South to fight a war. They just gave them basic defense type equipment.
So you came back, and then you just about to work in the oil company, but the war broke out. So what happened to you?
Okay. Listen.
Were you recalled, or did you enlist, or were you drafted?
Okay.
What happened?
Okay, here's what happened. There was when the Korean War started, they were grabbing National Guard outfits. And there was a National Guard outfit in Utah that was called up and went to Fort Lewis. And they were under strength. They needed about 40% more men. So when I got out the first time, I signed up inactive reserve. And then when I was recalled then in September of 1950 and sent to Fort Lewis and was with this Utah National Guard outfit. And that was 105 self-propelled howitzers.
105?
Self-propelled, 105 howitzers. The guns were 105, and they called them howitzers.
Self-propelled?
That means they were put on a vehicle like a tank. Mm-hmm. They could ride around, but they didn't have to move them. They could drive the vehicle.
So you joined them, right?
I joined. I was assigned to them.
Assigned to it. And as what, corporal or what?
As a corporal. Mm. There's another story. When I graduated from college, because of my previous military service, I could apply for a commission. Yeah. So I applied for a commission, second lieutenant. And I did finally get to be a second lieutenant. I was with this artillery outfit. We went to Korea, and then my commission caught up with me, and I was assigned. I had to enlist in this, as I could stay as corporal, I could go in as a second lieutenant. So I selected second lieutenant and requested that, and I was in Korea then at the time, get training. And when my commission came through, it was March 4th, 1951. And I was sent right up near Seoul. The fighting was going on up there, and I was assigned to an engineer outfit, a second engineer special brigade.
Second engineer.
Special brigade. Now, that meant it was a special army unit that specialized in amphibious landings. Mm-hmm. They made, during World War II, they would make amphibious landings. And they made, I wasn't with them, but they made the invasion of Incheon in September.
But there was, when did you arrive in Korea?
January.
Of 1951.
Right.
So that was after the Incheon landing.
Right.
Yeah. So you arrived in January of 1951. Where, in Incheon?
Incheon. Mm-hmm. No, pardon me. I was with this Utah outfit, and we landed in Busan.
Busan. In January of 1951.
Right. And we started training with the artillery outfit, and then my commission came through, and I was assigned to this engineer outfit that was up in Incheon, right near the fighting, and I took an LST.
From Busan to Incheon.
Right.
Right. How was it like to be in Korea again, back again? But it's a completely different situation. When you were there in 1946-7, it was very peaceful. You were occupying forces, well received by the Korean people. But now you are back, and now there is a war. What is it like to be there again? Were you scared? Were you afraid? Or how was it?
The Army was a job. I was trained as an engineer, and our duties as an engineer, we operated the port of Incheon, so I was not right on the front lines, but we were unloading ships and supplies for the troops, and so that was our support there.
Now you are as a second lieutenant,
right?
And you are the leader, and you belong to 2nd Engineer Special Brigade.
Right. You got it.
Mm-hmm. How many soldiers under your?
50.
50. So you are platoon leader?
Platoon leader.
Yeah.
Yes. I was a platoon leader. It was kind of a jump from being a corporal to a platoon leader,
Yes.
But I had previous training.
I know.
Yeah.
And you were there in Escom City before, so you knew around the region.
I knew the roads. Yes.
So what was your mission? What was your daily duty in January of 1951? What were you doing there?
Wait, now, January of 51, I was just living with this artillery unit from Utah, and they were training, and in Busan.
But you came to Incheon
in March when I got my commission.
Mm-hmm.
Now I didn't do too much real training. Being a headquarters company, we were running for supplies and everything, for getting supplies.
Well, there's a war, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And my job there, my first job as a second lieutenant in Incheon was unloading LSTs. We worked 24 hours a day. My shifts were 7 to 7, 7 days a week. Every 2 weeks we got 1 day off. And when the ships came in, we got them unloaded, and that was our schedule.
What kind of stuff in the ship that you unloaded?
Okay, ammunition, military units, a lot of military with trucks and.
You mean soldiers and trucks?
Yes. Mm-hmm. In fact, my Utah National Guard outfit, I saw them come through Incheon. I was down there at the dock when their LST came in, and they said, they pointed to me, and I recognized a few of them, and they had me over that night before they went up to the front lines. So I was glad to see them once more. My next job as a second lieutenant was, after unloading the LSTs, I moved to a different job of unloading the cargo ships. They would come in, because of the tides, they couldn't come up and pull up alongside a dock. So everything had to be lighter to shore. And we lightered, we'd have 10 ships in at once. And my job was to go around. We had cargo crews, Korean cargo crews, one sergeant in charge of every ship, and Korean cargo crews that would handle the cargo. And I would go out every day and see how things were going and see if I could correct any bottlenecks.
Was there any dangerous moment during your mission there that you could be killed, or there were any guerrilla or spy or?
Only one thing we had, a small communist plane would fly over and,
Bad Chuck Charlie?
yes, Bed Check Charlie.
Yeah?
You heard of Bed Check Charlie?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I hate to even bring it up because the first time we had Bed Check Charlie, we weren't ready for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then
What happened? When first?
then we got our anti-aircraft 50 caliber guns out and installed them, and he never came back. But we call him Bed Check Charlie because he showed up at 10 o'clock around bed check time.
But your experience as occupying forces from 1946 to 47 had to be really important at the time, right? Because you knew Korea, you knew the Ascom City, you knew the Incheon and Songdo, right?
Right. Yes, I knew all that area, and so being during the war when our engineers operated the port, I knew my way around, and one time they came in and requested, we want the engineers to build us a rifle range. And I said, well, why build one? There's one 5 miles down the road. So I took them down there and showed it to them, and they used it for practice. So I did know my way around, and
so your service was really appreciated by the superiors too, right?
Yes.
They knew that you are valuable to them.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we were there just kind of with this operating the port of Incheon. We operated it until October of 1951. And then we went back to Japan and gave the troops in Japan amphibious landing training. They had to go through training. We figured every Army unit had to have amphibious landing training. So when we went back to Japan, I was so-called cadre. And every month we had a maneuver, and it was split between 2 companies. So every other month I would go out to sea with the Navy and the Army and the Marines and go through an amphibious landing.
I see. When did you leave Korea?
I left Korea in October 51.
51 to Japan.
Yes. There was still a lot of fighting going on there.
And also you were second lieutenant there. Were you able to go to Seoul during the second time when you were in Korea?
Oh, yes.
So now you know you are the kind of only one in Wilsonville, Oregon State, that you saw Korea, Seoul City in 1946 to 7, and then you saw Korea in 1951.
Right.
Compare it. How drastically changed it? And please give us detailed description of the building and people and how drastically changed from 1947 to 51.
Okay. Well, when I got there during the fighting, there were many refugees going south for safety. Mm-hmm. So that was happening, many refugees, and really, though Seoul was just occupied by troops towards the end, and the refugees were all gone. So that's the way they stayed alive. And when I got there, Incheon was leveled. Every building was demolished from the September MacArthur's Landing. They just leveled everything.
So it was completely different from the Incheon that you saw in 1947, in 1951.
It was what?
You saw Incheon before.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So how different?
Okay. In 1947, there were streets, buildings, pharmacies, stores. You could go there. When I got there in 51, it was a level, no buildings.
Nothing left.
Nothing left.
How about Seoul?
Seoul, the main buildings were still there. The railroad station was there, but
It was quite different from 1947 in 1951, right?
Yes.
How?
No people. No people in Seoul. And I would say, see, there was no farming, no agriculture going on. It was just more or less a combat zone. Seoul was taken 4 times, and I saw it the last time we captured it.
So after you left Korea in October of 1951, have you been invited back to go to Korea to see it?
Yes.
When?
I've been back 3 times. I use the military historic tours outfit, and they have tours with the Korean Veterans Group in Korea. So I would go back there. I waited about 10 years before I went the first time. I went by myself. Then the second time, 5 years later, I could go again, and I tried to get a family member to go with me.
When was it?
I would say, let's see, 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Yeah.
So about 20?
20. Was there an anniversary 60th?
Yes.
I believe we were there then.
Uh-huh. You mean 60th anniversary of Armistice? Armistice or the breakout?
Let's see.
Was the Armistice anniversary or the Korean War breakout anniversary?
Oh, no, that was the June 20th.
June 20th.
25th or something. It was the start of the war.
Yep. And so...
So I took, on that trip, being as I could take a family member, my wife didn't want to go, so I ended up taking my grandson, 14-year-old grandson.
Aha.
He was a 6-foot boy, 14 years old. I took him with me to Korea, and he got to see the country and all the differences there. In other words, it's a big new economy, 14th in the world.
So what did you see? How was it to be there?
It's, you can't compare it. It's a modern city, and subways, everything very modern. And it's just like an American city.
What did you tell your grandson? Do you remember what did you tell him? That I was here. What was his name? What is his name, grandson?
Grant.
Grant. And what did you tell him?
Well, I told him, like I was at Incheon, I was here, and I pointed out certain hotels that I went to in occupation time, and they were still there. Part of it. I believe this. How about Chosun Hotel? That was the biggest, fanciest hotel at the time, and they even kept the patio or the pagoda for the new hotel.
Right.
So,
yeah. And did you ever imagine that Korea would become like this today, that when you saw in 2012?
No.
Why not?
Well, Korea's done a tremendous job they say they went from one generation from the rice paddies to building ships and cars in just one generation.
Yeah.
And the people were very industrious, hardworking, and they did it on their own, really. And all this tectonic stuff they're making today, we didn't have it 20 years ago. They're modern Samsung, and the cars, and everybody. Mm. No, you wouldn't think they could, well, compare it to the North. The North is still suffering from famine and clothing. I have a friend that goes to North Korea and works with a shoe factory to make shoes for the North Koreans because they're still suffering. They can't even move around up north. They can't go from one city to another like the South. The South with their democracy. I credit the democracy for their ability to.
So John, what do you think is the historical lesson that young generations, both in Korea and the United States, has to learn from your experience and from the Korean War? What are the lessons that you think we need to know, the young generations?
That's a good question. They've got to know the history of stopping communism. That was the beginning of the Korean War, stopping communism. And we've got to draw a line some places, and we want to protect democracy. And as we always say, freedom isn't free. And people have got to volunteer. They've got to take part in take part in the rest of the world.
You never imagined that you born in Lancaster, Ohio, and you graduate high school in Phoenix, and you went to college, but you never imagined that you'd come to Korea so many times through the occupying forces and the Korean War, and then revisit, right?
Right, never did. Now, one thing, you said I was Ohio or something?
Lancaster, Ohio. No, I'm so sorry.
No.
I mixed up. Long Beach, California, right?
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And yes. And in fact, I was there just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
5 or 6 years ago. No one did go with me, but my other daughter went with me, and we visited the 38th parallel and relived the war. We went to Incheon and saw that.
What would you say to the Korean people?
What I said to them.
Now.
Okay.
About your service, about the changes that are taking place in Korea, about the relationship between U.S. and Korea.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I would say keep democracy all the time. These communists, any form of government besides private enterprise and democracy is the future for a good country.
You know, you've been there twice as a soldier. Is there any other episode you didn't share with me but you have to let us know? Anything that you remember?
Well, one interesting thing, while I was in Incheon as a lieutenant, incidentally, after 6 months in combat, you could get promoted. So I got promoted to first lieutenant. So I just made 6 months, and they promoted me, and went back to Japan about 2 months later. But one of my interesting jobs there was a cargo ship ran aground 30 miles out at sea. And
In Japan, you mean?
in Korea,
In Incheon, yes.
Incheon Harbor. And I was selected along with several other officers to go out there and unload the ship. It hit rocks. It was anchored on rocks. And in fact, at night, it would, with the high tides and the winds, the ship would rock on the rocks. Every night I went to bed with a life jacket right by my pillow. So we unloaded the ship. It was loaded with gasoline. So we had the problems of vapors. We laid the law down to the Korean workers. Anybody seen smoking over the side? And they just, they knew they shouldn't smoke. And we unloaded the ship, and the Navy came in and floated it, patched it up, and took it back to Japan. So that was a very interesting job. In between, while the job was going on, a hurricane came up, and we had experienced 8-foot waves, up and down, up and down. So we abandoned the ship and went to another ship that was safe. So we went there and spent the night on that and came back the following day when the waters were calm. But those things happened, and we just worked and did it.
John, thank you for your service twice, not just during the Korean War, but before. So you know Korea very, very well compared to other Korean War veterans. And thanks to your service, Korea is what it is right now. And you've been back there 3 times. You saw what's been done there. So it's the legacy of your service.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
It's a pleasure being here.